Okay, hello Cloud Gurus, and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we're going to look at compliance frameworks, and we're going to identify sort of the most popular compliance frameworks that you should be aware of going into your exam. So the main three, to be honest, is PCI DSS, ISO, and HIPAA. Those are the main three that are certainly the most prevalent within the industry. Amazon will constantly release new blogs, basically once a month, about new services that are HIPAA compliant in particular. So I would recommend going over to the aws.amazon.com/compliance page and just going through and having a browse, and definitely go and read about those three different standards. I'm going to cover PCI DSS in quite a bit of detail because that is by far the most important one. I'd also would, if I was you, especially if you're an American, go to HIPAA's website and just read up about HIPAA. HIPAA is basically laws regarding the protection of private healthcare information for US citizens. So we'll start with ISO 27001. Basically, this specifies the requirements for establishing, implementing, and operating, monitoring, reviewing, maintaining, and improving a documented information security management system within the context of the organization's overall business risk. So ISMS is Information Security Management System, and basically 27001 establishes how you should both implement this, how you should operate it, how you should monitor it and review it, as well as maintaining and improving it. So ISO 27001 is a huge part of IT security. Again, like I said, when I was studying my master's for computer science, this was one of the biggest topics inside it. Moving on to FedRAMP. FedRAMP is the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program. It's basically a government-wide program that provides a standardized approach to security assessment, authorization, and continuous monitoring for cloud products and services. We also have HIPAA. HIPAA is really big in the US. I didn't even know about it until I started working for US companies, and it just comes up all the time. Basically, it's the Federal Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, and the primary goal of the law is to make it easier for people to keep health insurance, but to protect the confidentiality and security of healthcare information, and to help the healthcare industry control administrative costs. So basically, it wants to lower the cost of healthcare while still ensuring that people, have very good data security around their healthcare. Because if you've got a serious health condition, you don't want that, publicized to the world necessarily. Moving on to NIST. So NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's part of the US Department of Commerce, and basically it's a framework for improving critical infrastructure cybersecurity, and there's a set of industry standards and best practices to help organizations manage their cybersecurity risks, and you can check out nist.gov/cyber framework and just have a brief sort of read through that. Finally, we've got PCI DSS, by far the biggest in the entire world because it is a global standard. So this is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or PCI DSS. We're at version 3.2 right now. Basically, it's a widely accepted set of policies and procedures intended to optimize the security of credit, debit, and cash card transactions, and to protect card holders against the misuse of their personal information. So PCI DSS has 12 different requirements, and to be honest, the way I got one of my first solutions architecture jobs was I memorized the 12 requirements for PCI DSS, and that really made me stand out compared to other people because it showed I was a security guru. So they are really easy to memorize. You won't need to memorize them going into your exam, but if you are interviewing for a security role, I seriously recommend memorizing these because you will stand out. So requirement 1 is to install and maintain a firewall configuration to protect cardholder data. So always have a firewall in place to protect your cardholder data. You wouldn't believe some of the customers that I've worked with in the past where some of them don't even have hardware firewalls. They're literally relying on Windows firewalls inside of Windows, and it's just ridiculous. And these are big companies. I'm not naming any names though. Requirement 2 is to not use vendor-supplied defaults for system passwords and other security parameters. So obviously don't use the vendor-supplied password and usernames. Requirement 3 is to protect stored cardholder data. So you might want to do that using encryption at rest. You might want to control access to those keys. You basically just have to protect it. Number 4 is to encrypt the transmission of cardholder data across open public networks. So again, you use the HTTPS protocol. You'd never encrypt cardholder data across HTTP. And again, I've even just last year, I was trying to book something for reInvent, and I went on to a merchant site inside Vegas, and it was asking me to enter my credit card details for a deposit. And I noticed that it was over HTTP. It wasn't over HTTPS. They were blatantly breaking PCI DSS protocols. I raised it with them, but they didn't even understand what I was talking about. Requirement 5 is to protect all systems against malware and regularly update your antivirus software and programs. Requirement 6 is to develop and maintain secure systems and applications. So always make sure your applications are also patched and up to date. Requirement 7 is to restrict access to cardholder data by business need to know. I mean, your sales guys or your marketing guys, or maybe your sales guys need to know people's cardholder data because they're making a sale. But then your janitor doesn't need to know, or have access to cardholder data. So you should restrict it by a business, function. Identify and authenticate access to system components is requirement 8. So you always want to make sure that you're authenticating a user before giving them access to your system. So we can use things like identity access management for that, or we can use third-party tools like Auth0. Requirement 9 is to restrict physical access to cardholder data. So maybe you print out copies of people's credit card records. Again, you don't want the janitor going in and cleaning up the desk and finding a whole bunch of credit card numbers, expiry dates, and CSV numbers on the back. Requirement 10, we want to track and monitor all access to network resources and cardholder data. So we can do that with a variety of AWS services such as CloudWatch. We could do it with CloudTrail or any other kind of logging tool. And I've used this graphic from AlertLogic's SOC, so Secure Operations Center. Big shout out to the AlertLogic people. I'm quite good friends with quite a few of them in the UK. So AlertLogic basically do a whole bunch of security monitoring for you, and they can basically aggregate this, and then if there's any issues, they'll alert you immediately. Requirement 11 is to regularly test security systems and processes. So you might do this via pen testing. You might do this, in the real world by simulating phishing attacks. There's a great company out there called KnowBe4. KnowBe4 do exactly that. They will go in and simulate phishing attacks against, people's staff, and they'll say whether or not the staff have passed it. And if they haven't passed it, they'll educate the staff on how to prevent this in the future. So big shout out to KnowBe4 as well. And then finally, we have a requirement 12, which is to maintain a policy that addresses information security for all personnel. So moving on to some other frameworks, we've got SAS 70, which is a statement on auditing standards number 7. We've got SOC 1, which is the Service Organizations Controls, and it comes from basically some accounting standards. And then we've got FISMA, which is the Federal Information Security Modernization Act, which of course is around trying to get the US government to modernize its information security. And then finally, you should be aware of FIPS 140-2. This is a US government computer security standard, which is used to approve cryptographic modules. It's rated from level 1 to level 4, with 4 being the highest security, and Cloud HSM meets the level 3 standard. So you might have heard me mentioning FIPS 142 throughout this course. When you need FIPS 142 as a requirement, you're going to use Cloud HSM over KMS. So what are my exam tips? Well, just be aware of the 3 main ones. PCI DSS, ISO 27001, and HIPAA. I'd also go and check out the compliance page, aws.amazon.com/compliance. And again, like I said, FIPS 142. Just be aware of that. If you've got a requirement or you've got a scenario-based question where you need FIPS 142 compliant to level 3, Cloud HSM all the way. So that's it from me, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.